Well, welcome to the channel, and I've got such lovely, exciting stories for you this year, which you're going to love. Well, we're not quite in the new year yet, but there's so many stories that you're just going to enjoy so very much. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Ellie. And my strange story begins when I was living and working in downtown Seattle as a local vet in the area. I was happily married at the time, and still am, to my husband Piers and two younger children, Agnes, who was 8, and her brother James, who was 5 at the time. Everything changed very dramatically in my life when I discovered that a great uncle of mine had left me his entire fortune, which included his large estate, which meant I now owned a beautiful country farmhouse in West Virginia that was situated on a vast acreage of land. I could not believe how fortunate and blessed I was to be left such a great inheritance. I had never known or met my great-uncle before. Well, not that I could recall anyway. The fact that he had left me this entire estate came as a bolt out of the blue. To cut a long story short, when my husband and I visited the old farmhouse in Virginia, we knew that we wanted to relocate and to raise our children in this extraordinary, alluring and idyllic part of the world, and so that is exactly what we did. We felt raising our kids in such an exquisite, enchanting rural setting would be a huge privilege for our kids and offer them a really rather spectacular childhood, something that I wished I'd had. We moved into our attractive restored farmhouse, which had initially been built in 1910, after we had renovated it in such a way that it met our immediate needs as a growing family, such as introducing larger bedroom sizes for the kids, with greater storage space for all their stuff. In addition, we also incorporated large picture windows throughout that made the most of the arresting panoramic views of the countryside, which were so incredibly breathtaking. There were times I literally had to pinch myself to assure myself that this picture or retreat was indeed our new home. I did my level best to preserve the historic integrity and character of this charming white house, with its green roof and matching windows. To top it all up, our dwelling was surrounded with an impressive colonnaded portico, so typical of the 1900s. It was so perfectly nestled in the heart of the valley, which was surrounded by rolling green hills, some pretty pasture land, interesting rocky outcrops, and a beautiful silvery lake that was flanked by a vast area of dreamy forest. This pleasing woodland retreat protracted back for many miles, which was teeming with indigenous wildlife, which we would invariably see regularly frolicking across the green grass, most especially the ever-so-serene and gentle white-tailed deer, and of course rabbits, not to mention raccoons and foxes that often visited our premises at night. No sooner had we moved into our beautiful new abode, my daughter Agnes kept telling me that she was seeing dead people walking in her room at night. She told me that some of them were dressed funny, in strange old-fashioned clothes, like bustle skirts and long-sleeved lacy tops, while she would see men wearing tails and top hats. My daughter told me that she could actually hear their boots and physically feel the vibration as they walked past her across the oak floor towards her wardrobe, and they would walk straight through it as if there was no physical boundary blocking their path whatsoever, and would promptly disappear before her very eyes. When my daughter told me this, I was naturally very alarmed, as the last thing you want to hear from your daughter is that she's seeing the dead. What was surprising to me was that for a young girl, she didn't seem unduly alarmed or afraid by her bizarre, outer-worldly, ethereal experiences, as you would have expected. "How do you know they're dead?" I asked her. "Because the man in the big black hat told me they were dead," she said. "He told me not to let the others know that I could actually see them." "Why did he say that to you?" I asked in surprise. "He told me that if they knew I could see them, they would bother me, because they would want me to send messages for them to people who were alive on the earth, and they would not stop bugging me and being very annoying." "What was this man's name that told you this?" I asked in amazement. "His name was Herbert. He said he was born in this house in 1915, she told me. He told me he was related to me by blood." "Well, you must listen to Herbert," I told my daughter, "and don't let those dead people know that you can see them. He obviously knows what he's talking about." I honestly did not know what to think, as I came from a deeply religious background myself, and so all the stuff concerning seeing dead people in my home was indeed disconcerting, and I was very disturbed. I was fortunately able to find an old picture of Herbert that belonged to my great-uncle, and I left the photograph lying around the house to see if my daughter would respond to it, and sure enough she came running into the kitchen, showing me the photograph that she was holding in her hands, with a look of flustered excitement on her face. "This is the nice dead man! Remember, I told you about him, Herbert, who talks to me in my bedroom at night. He's a really nice man, Mum, and not scary like some of them are." I was now resolute that my daughter was indeed seeing dead people, and I realised I needed to get some help, and I did some research and called a priest and a medium to visit our home to talk to my daughter and to find out exactly what was going on. As you can imagine, I wasn't remotely comfortable with all this outer-worldly stuff. I'd grown up to believe that ghosts were demonic beings. But then, why on earth was my innocent young daughter so open to seeing these dead entities walking around her bedroom at night? None of it made any sense to me whatsoever, and was beyond my realm of comprehension or understanding. I spoke at length about this horrifying issue to my husband, who believed my daughter would grow out of seeing these strange apparitions. "I think kids are more sensitive to the paranormal than adults, but I'm sure she'll outgrow these visions of hers." He told me this in such a nonchalant way, as if it was no big deal. I soon learnt that his own mother had seen dead people when she was a child, and so I now knew where my daughter had inherited her gift from. When the medium arrived at my house, she was a pretty young woman called Melody, with dark hair, fair skin and soulful blue eyes, and she was dressed in a long, flowing, rather bohemian-looking leopard-skin dress. "Hello," she said. "It's really good to meet you. I'd like to introduce you to my work partner," she said, introducing me to the priest. "This is Father Montgomery. We often work together as a team, investigating hauntings, possessions, poltergeist activity, and all kinds of paranormal stuff. We've pretty much seen and done it all, so there's not much that will surprise us." "Good," I said. "That's very reassuring to hear." "Before we finally meet your daughter, I'd like to see the room where your daughter claims to be seeing all these dead people, if you don't mind." As I showed Melody around my home, she asked me if we'd recently renovated our house, and I told her that indeed we had. "As I thought," she said, nodding. "There's nothing like stirring up ghostly activity more than a restoration of an old home. It happens all the time." Before long we were all climbing the stairs, and I led Melody and Father Montgomery into my daughter's bedroom. Melody stood very still, like a statue frozen in time, as she entered the bedroom, and I noticed her eyes fixed on the closet in my daughter's room for a very long time. I also observed that her eyes seemed to notice things that neither Father Montgomery or I could actually see. "You have a very large portal open in this room," she said. "The best way I can describe it is like a train station that opens into our reality, for the dead, where they can enter and leave at will, and the portal is in your daughter's closet over there. I can see it's a large opening that needs to be closed, because it can draw good and bad entities throughout this opening. It could potentially be problematic for your daughter if we don't close it. Your daughter's psychic ability would be like a magnet to the dead. I can tell that your daughter being able to see this clearly makes me believe that she has a very powerful psychic gift." I gasped. "Please don't tell me that. That's the last thing I need to hear." It's difficult for parents to be able to accept their children having a psychic gift, because it frightens them, as we're always fearful of what we don't understand, and so we block it out rather than make sense of it, she told me. "You see, we all have an inbuilt paradigm of the world, and if things don't conform to our perception of reality, we have a subconscious way of refusing to believe it, or dismissing it out of hand, as all just being nonsense. For many people, having to accept the paranormal exists is something that forces us to concede that there is so much more to this world than we can actually physically imagine or see. And that is incredibly unnerving for a lot of people who like to be in control of their lives, and not being able to control the things they cannot see makes them uneasy and very insecure. We all like to feel that we're in control to some degree of our lives. Your daughter can see beyond the veil, and so she needs to remain very grounded and strong, and to learn how to manage her gift effectively, so that she's always in control, and not the other way round, if you understand what I'm saying. I can teach her how to handle this invisible world, much like switching a button on and off, so that she can live a relatively normal life. Before long, Father Montgomery and Melody spoke to my daughter and discussed everything that she could see in our home, and my daughter talked at length about her friendship with the ghost of Herbert, who travelled in and out of our reality and was intent on protecting my daughter, and was disquieted by my daughter's psychic gift, because he was worried about other dead people suddenly taking advantage of her, something that Melody really did understand. Father Montgomery blessed our entire home, and then Melody closed the portal in my daughter's bedroom, and she told me that things should settle down in our home before long, and I'm glad to say that they actually did. My daughter no longer reported seeing dead people walking around her bedroom at night, nor did the mysterious figure of Herbert come to visit her anymore, much to my huge relief. I put the haunting memory of those paranormal episodes behind me, almost as if they'd never actually existed. It was easier for me that way, to push that bizarre phenomenon behind me, rather than acknowledge to myself that these strange anomalies had indeed occurred in my home. Soon I was enjoying my life in the West Virginian countryside and doing regular part-time shifts at the local vets, while my husband was working freelance with his landscape gardening business. He'd recruited several burly, rather strapping-looking lads on his team, and the business appeared to be thriving. We were able to both share the responsibility of taking charge over our children by alternating our shifts, and so things invariably worked out incredibly well. One morning when my husband was out working and I was watching the children, I asked them to go and pick berries for me from the hedgerows, as the seasonal berries were plentiful this year. I gave them a basket to busy themselves with the picking, while I set up my canvas on an easel and proceeded to paint the landscape, while keeping a steely eye on both of my children. I'd recently started art classes and was learning to work with oils on canvas, and I was really enjoying the whole experimental process of working with paint, and slowly developing a passion for everything. I could hear my kids chuckling in the background, and their mouths were stained in bright crimson berry juice as they picked and ate the berries. They chased each other around the hedgerows, all the while laughing, giggling, and having so much fun. James was hosing my daughter down with his spray gun, and my daughter was shrieking in delight. My children loved it out here, and they adored their new lives in the country. "Don't eat them all," I teased, "or I won't be able to make any jams or jelly. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mum," they said. Soon I was so caught up in my painting and so absorbed that I realised I hadn't heard my children giggling for quite a while. I breathed a huge sigh of relief when I looked up from my painting and saw my daughter still busily picking and eating berries. I could see her basket was heaving with the fruit, and she had done an awesome job in collecting so much. "Well done," I said. "I think that's enough. Let's go back to the house for some cold lemonade, shall we? I don't know about you, but I'm rather parched." "And some chocolate biscuits," she chirruped. "Very well," I said. "Chocolate biscuits and lemonade it is." "Where's your brother?" I asked. "The bear took him," my daughter said, in such a nonchalant, matter-of-fact tone, as if it was perfectly normal for bears to pick up little kids and take them for rides. "What are you talking about?" I asked, looking at my daughter with an agog expression on my face. "The bear took him," she repeated, "for a piggyback ride. You know, a piggyback." I looked at my daughter with the most horrified expression on my face. "What bear?" I asked. "Tell me, what did you see? What bear are you talking about?" "He was a big, hairy bear, with a human-like face," she said, smiling jubilantly. "He was very nice. He offered to give me a ride also, but I told him to take my brother first. He said he'll come back for me next, but only if I wait here for him." "You stupid girl," I snapped angrily. "Why would you let this man take your brother like that? You know you're not supposed to go with strangers." My daughter began to cry. "I told you, it was a bear." "It was not a man," she insisted. "Did he speak to you like I'm speaking to you now?" I asked suddenly. My daughter thought about it for a while. "No," she said. "He spoke to me in my head." "Where did he go?" I asked my daughter. "He promised he'd bring James back. He wasn't lying, Mum. I know he wasn't lying. He never, ever lies." "How do you know that?" I asked my daughter. My daughter looked confused for a moment. Sometimes I just know things, she explained. Like I knew we'd live in this house because I saw this house in my head before we ever came to live here. Remember, I drew it for you. You said it was an accurate picture. That's right, I said. You did. I do remember that your picture was very, very accurate. You're right about that. I also knew when Granny was going to die, she reminded me. Remember, I told you the night before she went away and she left us. I looked at my daughter in consternation, and the memory came flooding back. I remember I'd been reading a book on my bed when my daughter had come in and told me that she'd seen Granny, who told her she was going far away and to say goodbye to everybody. She also told me to be a good girl, my daughter had told me. I remember the very next day that the nursing home had actually phoned me to tell me that my mother had passed away during the night. My daughter was right about that. I suddenly remembered my daughter's psychic ability, and I realised she had read the strange creature's energy, and whatever this bear was, he clearly communicated with her telepathically, and she could sense that the creature had good intentions towards my son. Could she be right, I wondered, or had the creature literally deceived her? Sweetheart, I said to her, are you absolutely sure that this bear you saw will not harm your brother? My daughter burst out laughing. He'd never, ever hurt him, she giggled. He's ever so nice. He'll bring James back if he sees you're not around. She said this very suddenly. He's not very sure about you. I decided to trust my daughter's psychic ability for a moment. I mean, what did I have to lose? My gut instincts told me to listen to her, because something in my gut believed that she was right. If I called the police, things could go terribly wrong, and the so-called bear could bolt away, and I'd be unable to retrieve my son. I told my daughter to go to her bedroom and proceeded to hide behind a tree that was close to the hedgerow, where I believe I could remain concealed without being observed by this mysterious bear, or whatever the creature was. Alarming thoughts whirled and whizzed around my head like a washing machine in full throttle. What if this? What if that? Came the thoughts barging into my head like an uninvited, unwanted intruder that was eager to remind me of all my shortcomings as a mother. I was beginning to wonder if a man wearing a bear suit had surreptitiously sneaked onto our property and tried to abduct my kids. It would be natural for kids to be excited about a man that looked like a bear offering them piggybacks. I knew how my kids loved the man wearing the green dragon outfit at Walmart, who was promoting a new brand of sparkling lemonade. My 2 kids had loved the man as he'd wiggled around the store, causing all the kids to laugh out hysterically. And subsequently I'd returned home with trolley loads of this lemonade, as my kids knew that such a purchase was very pleasing for the big green dragon, and they talked relentlessly about the green dragon for many days after that. Quite suddenly I heard the sound of my son James chuckling, and I saw that he was riding on the back of the most colossal creature that I'd ever observed in my entire life, which I realised immediately was most certainly not a bear, nor was it a man, but it was very definitely, without question, a Bigfoot. Bear in mind, I'm a vet, and over the years I've heard of people discussing this elusive, mysterious beast called Bigfoot that was supposed to roam the forests of North America. But to be blatantly honest with you, I never believed a word of any of it. I'd assumed that anyone who remotely believed the spurious creature to be actually true was about as nutty as a fruitcake, or clearly missing a few marbles. Yet standing yards away from me, larger than life, carrying my son on his shoulders, was a Bigfoot, and the critter was absolutely colossal. I would say he was easily 10 foot tall, 4 foot wide, and 900 to 1,000 pounds, and was covered in long flowing auburn hair that was a little tangled and matted, but if it was brushed it would look superb, because the colour was utterly phenomenal. I noticed the creature was so powerfully strong, as every part of his body was ripped with muscle definition, that most bodybuilders would strive their entire lives to achieve, with countless hours spent working out in the gym and consuming an excessive amount of protein to bulk up, and probably even taking some steroids to boot. I'm in no doubt that this creature's genealogy is built for power, strength and speed, and you could class him quite literally as an apex predator, easily in line with a tiger or a lion. I was in absolute awe, and I was stunned at what I was observing, but I restrained myself from rushing towards the Bigfoot, which as a mother is the hardest thing to do. But my daughter had described the creature as being very wary and reticent of me. The last thing I wanted was to scare the Bigfoot off so that he'd run away with my kid. It looked like he'd actually brought my child back to the hedgerows where he'd been initially gathering fruit. I watched as the Bigfoot lowered my son to the ground and pointed towards our home, as if telling my son to go back to the house. I was exceedingly frustrated when my kid was begging the Bigfoot for another ride and was having one of his childlike tantrums. I actually felt exceedingly embarrassed by my child's insolent behaviour. "I want another ride! I want another ride! I want another ride!" He kept crying, "I want another ride," and stamping his foot in defiance. I couldn't believe my kid was behaving like such a spoilt, petulant brat. The Bigfoot patted his head in a gentle, kindly gesture and made a chattering sound that was almost like a language of some kind. It was like he was trying to calm down my little ungrateful child. Once again he pointed to the house, and my son started tottering towards the house, looking far from pleased. He was stamping his foot, and he was showing as much gratitude for his ride as a spoilt rich kid that always invariably gets his way. Had I brought up my child to be such a thankless brat, I wondered? Even though I was furious with the hairy critter for scaring me half to death by taking my child off like that, I was torn between a rock and a hard place. I was equally as ashamed of my child's abysmal behaviour. Talk about lack of gratitude. I could hardly believe it. I watched the Bigfoot turn around and glide seamlessly into the forest, and he moved with such a flawless grace. What an incredible creature, I found myself thinking. When I returned back to the house, I gave my son a very hard time about accepting a ride from a stranger, and I told him to never accept a ride from Bigfoot ever again. He tottered away and sulked all night, and told me that I was a very horrible mother for not letting him have rides with a very nice bear. "Something bad could have happened to you," I scolded him. Fast forward a few years, and I never actually told my husband about the Bigfoot on our land, who had given our son a piggyback. I didn't think somehow that would go down too well with him. I also couldn't get my head around what had actually transpired, so I was hardly going to share my story with anyone, for fear of being ridiculed or disbelieved. I always had a way of avoiding or talking about things that unsettled me. I guess it's always been my way of kind of dealing with things, I suppose. At that time I warned my children to never accept rides from anyone, whether they were human beings, bears, kangaroos or dragons. Accepting a ride from a critter was not a good idea and was strictly forbidden. My daughter is now 19 years old, and when I told her I was writing to you about my Bigfoot encounter, she told me that they never listened to me when I told them not to have rides with the Bigfoot all those years ago. She said that as kids, he had taken them for many rides several times behind my back, over many years. She said to me, "Mum, please don't be mad. That Bigfoot was such a nice fellow. I knew he'd never ever hurt us. He was so gentle, and I can't expect you to understand that, but I knew that in my gut, because I have that psychic awareness." She also talked to me about him like he was a human, but then she told me that she had communicated with him telepathically, and if I could see things through her eyes, I would understand what a phenomenal creature he actually was. "He's gone away," she told me, "because he died a couple of years ago from heart failure. He was very, very old." "How do you know all this?" I asked in amazement. "Because he visits me sometimes in spirit," she told me. "He says he's in a very happy place now, but he misses giving us piggybacks." "Are you still seeing dead people?" I asked her in horror. "Oh, yes, Mum. It doesn't stop, but you just block it out, which is what I do most of the time. But I have spoken to Herbert once or twice, and to that uncle that left you the farm more recently." "Really?" I asked. "Did you ask him why he left me this whole estate of his? I never did figure that one out." "He said that you were only a kid when you came to his farm once, and you have no recollection of it, but he never forgot the way you interacted with his dogs. He said that in that moment he decided he would leave everything to you because he liked your heart. He says he's glad you've preserved the integrity of his home, and he likes the way you run things on the farm." "You're kidding," I said. "He told you all that?" "Oh, and by the way, your mother sends her love. She's very upset with you because you never wear the pearls she left you." "How do you know about that?" I asked. "Because your mother told me," she laughed. I immediately went to my jewellery box and put on my pearls. Mother, wherever you are, I hope you're happy. I'm wearing your pearls now. I have asked my daughter to write to you and share her stories with you about growing up with a Bigfoot who gave her piggybacks, and she's very eager to share her story with you. So there you are. That's my story. I just want to thank you so very much for that incredible, incredible story. Wow, what an incredible experience. And to think that that Bigfoot brought your son back and was true to his word, just like your daughter said, he won't lie, she just knew. What an extraordinary story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.